I think a lot of y'all probably know this one's very personal. I'm a woman who's had an abortion in this state, and it is really tough to sit and talk about it. And I appreciate y'all engaging on it. And it's just hard. It's just hard because it's the folks who are working on this fix are, from my perspective, the folks who have created the problem. And it's been very difficult to experience the problem in such a personal way, not only for myself, but for dear friends that have needed abortions, for patients who are pregnant, who are struggling and fearful, for physicians and nurses that I practice with, who've really struggled. And so we know reproductive health care in this state is really broken, has been for some time. Over the past 4 years, we've watched women suffer and die. And this bill is the confirmation that we all agree that something is broken in Texas. And I am also grateful. I'm grateful for the way that this bill is going to carve out the medical exceptions that hospitals and doctors are begging for. But it does leave Texans in the worst, most devastating situations without recourse. After this bill passes, and I'm voting yes on it, Texans will still not be able to receive an abortion in case of incest, rape, or fatal fetal anomalies. So even with this bill, which I do think will save lives, we are forcing Texas mothers to risk their lives, to carry non-viable pregnancies or terminal fetuses all the way to term, potentially having to give birth. And what a tragic metaphor that is, to give birth to death. And in the meantime, we traumatize our healthcare workforce, our physicians, our nurses, my coworkers. So SB 31 is not a full solution, but it is a step to give medical providers clear, consistent, and uniform guidelines. But I am voting yes because these clarifications will save lives. I'm just heartbroken that this legislature refuses to restore abortion care in Texas, and that other lives will be lost because of that. So thank you to every single Texan who spoke up. People have shared their hearts, their stories, their tragedies, their pain with us. And that's the reason that we're even able to have this conversation today. So I'm just so grateful to the people of Texas who've never given up, who continue to show up, to speak up, and to fight to restore safe, legal abortion care in Texas. So even if this bill passes and it were to result in more people having short barrel firearms, more people having more powerful and more concealable weapons that we know have been used to murder Texas children, if that results in a higher death rate, is this bill still worth it?
Well, I had my staff looking at that. We couldn't find any facts that would show that short barrel firearms have been linked to any kind of increase in crime. And there's still, a pistol is still very legal, and it's, we're talking about even more concealable.
Can you name any of the kind of immediate medical outcomes of a short-range shot from one of these guns? We know these things cause extensive tissue destruction. They require amputation. They're incompatible with survival. These are not wounds that anybody can survive. Lawmakers and the courts for about 100 years have all agreed that an extra hurdle in front of these firearms is pretty important. And I think we all know that the reason that there's a lack of data is because it has been hard for people to get their hands on these, thank God. And that the federal government neglected to research firearm violence for years because of the influence of special interests and lobbyists. So that's why you can't find the data, because luckily, there haven't been as many crimes committed by these because they have been harder to get. And in 2021, there were over 532,000 registered short-barreled rifles in the US. There is a growing interest in these firearms. There is a growing number of mass shootings. And so I just want to ask you one more time, what's the reason that you want to take away this slight roadblock that we've got in front of a really dangerous weapon? Are you aware that since 2017, the leading cause of death for children is accidental death, and the leading cause of those accidental deaths is, in fact, firearms and gun violence?
I'm sorry, can you restate the question?
Are you aware of that fact?
If you're stating it.
So you agree?
I'm aware that you're stating it.
Can you tell me approximately how many homes tend to actually follow safe storage laws or practice best practices for safe storage of firearms?
I don't have that information offhand, but I'd be happy to share with your office.
It's about 1/3. Pretty disappointing number in my opinion. Are you also aware that over half of childhood deaths related to firearms occur within the home where the child lives?
If that's what you're stating.
Okay. And any emergency room physician who works in trauma and treats children can tell you that the most common injury is a chest wound when children accidentally shoot themselves. Do you think, knowing that for adolescents as well, a firearm is associated with a 4-fold increase in the risk of death for suicide, that now is the appropriate time to loosen gun laws around our most vulnerable children who are in our care?
I reject the question. This is not a loosening. This is merely just the protections of firearms privacy for firearm owners in the state of Texas.
Let me rephrase. Is now the time to really ask fewer questions about which firearms are in the home of our most vulnerable children whose care we are responsible for?
Again, I'm going to have to reject the question. This is not a question of fewer questions. This is a concern of the privacy of those that are submitting themselves. And I'm sure if you've spoken to potential foster parents or anyone going through the process, this is a laborious part on themselves to subject themselves to all aspects of state questions.
And have you read the 2023 annual report of fatalities for children in DFPS and in foster care?
Not to my knowledge, no.
So I glanced at it right before this, and there were 5 gun deaths listed for children. So I invite you to read that report, and thank you so much for answering my questions. Hey y'all, I need to take a moment to share with you about arguably the worst vaccine bill of this session, Senate Bill 1887. Senate Bill 1887 would outright ban all mRNA vaccines in Texas, with an exception for cancer or genetic treatments. This bill is based on misinformation about the COVID-19 vaccines that have saved lives all across the world. Arguably 40,000 Texans died that didn't need to because they chose not to get vaccinated. Y'all know that I know this personally from working in the emergency department. The COVID-19 vaccines, like any sort of medical treatment, have side effects or have risks. The question is, how do those risks compare to the actual disease? What we see over and over again is the fears around these vaccines are based on misinformation about how quickly it was rolled out, when we know that research began on mRNA vaccines long before the COVID pandemic started. And let me be clear, this isn't lifting some requirement. This is an all-out ban. It's taking choice and removing medical treatments away from Texans. mRNA vaccines are not just for COVID-19. That's why the bill has a carve-out for cancer treatments and genetic treatments. In reality, there's potential for mRNA vaccines to have really positive implications for everything from sickle cell to HIV. If we stifle this innovation in Texas, we're also putting ourselves at higher risk for the next pandemic like bird flu. As a healthcare professional who worked through the pandemic, I can tell you that there was life before those vaccines and life after. As always, follow along. We'll get you an update later today. Send us a DM with any questions, and thank you all so much for fighting for vaccines in Texas. Okay, y'all, I am back with an update on Senate Bill 1887, which would outright ban the administration of any mRNA vaccines in Texas. The first thing I want to say is that we only got 16 hours notice that this bill would be heard. They actually had to suspend Senate rules to get it heard that quickly, and it gives the public almost no time to process or respond. That being said, we heard testimony from folks who did quote some misinformation, as well as testimony from fantastic advocates from across the state who work on mRNA research and care deeply about getting Texans vaccinated. Huge thank you to the Texas Medical Association, the Texas Nurses Association, the Immunization Partnership, and all of the student researchers who showed up tonight. It's important to note that there are folks out there who cannot be vaccinated, whether mRNA or any other kind of vaccine. People who are immune compromised rely on the rest of us to get safely vaccinated so that they don't get sick. Let's talk about SB 2 by the numbers. The governor declared school vouchers an emergency item. And now the Texas Senate is fast-tracking SB 2, which takes $1 billion of taxpayer money and gives it to wealthy families to help them pay for private schools. Based on projections from the state's budget board, the $1 billion cost of this program will balloon to $4.5 billion by 2030. By our state's own estimate, 95% of students who will use these vouchers in year one already attend private schools or are homeschooled, which means that the students in public schools won't even benefit from this program. Private schools can pick and choose who they admit. Even in a lottery system, if more applications come in than spots in the program, 20% of these vouchers are reserved for high-income families. SB 2 defines low income as 500% of the federal poverty line. This means that a family of four earning over $160,000 a year could get treated the exact same as a single parent on minimum wage. For reference, Houston's median income is just a little bit over $60,000 a year. So the big question is, where does the money for this program come from? And it comes from our general revenue. This is the same money that we could be using to stabilize the grid, support Texans after a disaster, workforce development, keeping our communities safe and replacing aging infrastructure. It's the same money that keeps our public schools open. SB 2 is a partial solution for a little over 35,000 students, instead of the investments that we desperately need for the 5.5 million Texas students who currently attend public school. We need to invest in our public schools, and that's why I'll be voting no on SB 2. For over 70 years, the Texas legislature stood firm against vouchers, protecting our commitment to public education and resisting unbelievably powerful lobbyists and wealthy private interests. And today, that legacy ends. I'm really overwhelmed to be in the room for it. This $1 billion private school voucher program is a fundamental betrayal of our constitutional obligation to support and maintain an efficient system of public free schools. The neighborhood schools in my district serve as anchors in our communities. These are schools that accept every child, regardless of ability or disability, background or circumstance. We should have put this decision where it belongs, on the ballot for the voters. But I think we know why it's not there. It wouldn't pass. We should be letting them decide if this is really the direction that they want for their children's future. This was our last chance, and I say was because we know that this is predetermined and people know how they're voting. Our last chance to stand up for Texas children, for our teachers, for our communities, and to affirm that public money belongs in public schools. The last thing I want to say is to my district, and it's just that I'm so sorry. I am so sorry I couldn't protect you from this. And I know how devastated we will all be, but when we're done licking our wounds, we're gonna put on our boots and get back out there. Because the dream to fully fund our public schools will not die, and I will work the rest of my life to make sure that it happens.
Okay, we are back, and we just wrapped for the night on the Senate floor talking about HB 2. We will finish up HB 2 tomorrow, the school funding bill on third reading. I am here with Senator Jose Menendez from San Antonio, who is on the Senate Education Committee. In your words, what happened tonight? What's in HB 2? What do we need to share with folks?
Well, overall, $8.5 billion. Obviously, $3.74 billion of that's going to teacher pay raises. $500 million, which is brand new, we've never done before, will go to staff that are not teachers. Administrative assistants, bus drivers, cafeteria workers, full and part-time. We made sure of that, working with so many of our colleagues in the Democratic caucus to make sure that everyone, whether they work in the cafeteria or they drive a bus, they're going to see a little bit of a raise as well. We're also going to have money, $135 million for teacher preparation. We're going to do career and technology money, where we're going to actually have kids who get more funds for CTE, being JROTC or career and technology. That's a new thing. And then $430 million for safety. We're doubling the allotment per campus to $30,000 and $20 per child for average daily attendance. And actually, it's enrollment. Special education funding is going to get $850 million. That's going to go to help our school districts pay for evaluations and help offset a lot of the costs that they don't have any help with now. And for the first time in the history of the state, we're going to be treating special education students according to their severity, not just warehousing them all in one room.
That's super exciting. And I just want to reiterate, I think there's a big win that Democrats really fought for, and it's that $500 million for support staff. So can you just share, what those conversations were like reaching that $500 million number?
Senator Royce West and Senator Boris Miles and myself, we're pushing because we never get to see these pay raises ever get down deep into those people who are, helping us run the schools. Kids need to eat, and some of them only eat at school. And so the cafeteria workers hardly ever see this. And for so long, we've not been really fully funding our schools. This time, we're really putting a huge injection. And then when the school district said, hey, but time out, you're not putting anything into the basic allotment, we created a brand new allotment that has $1.3 billion. That's called the fixed cost allotment. That's going to help pay for insurance, health insurance costs, property and casualty, for rehiring of retired teachers. So they don't have that penalty anymore. And so that we can keep the most experienced teachers in our public schools.
Thank you so much, Senator. And I will share with y'all, we've been talking a lot about how the Senate had a more prescriptive approach, whereas the House had kind of proposed that basic allotment increase. We will see. We'll come back in 2 years and be able to evaluate what that looks like. And again, we'll be back with more information for y'all later, but I just wanted to share the update.
Members, we all agree that our natural environment and wildlife are precious. The health of our wildlife and ecosystems are intrinsically linked to public health, which is another reason why we must protect and care for our land, skies, and the biodiversity that makes Texas special through evidence-based solutions. I support and cherish all of creation and this principle. Concerns about migratory birds and their habitats deserve our serious attention as we consider how best to preserve Texas's natural heritage for future generations. This bill is nearsighted and overlooks what is most harmful to our environment, an over-reliance on fossil fuels. The BP Deepwater Horizon catastrophe in 2010 spilled 205.8 million gallons of oil and 225,000 tons of methane into the Gulf of Mexico. Only about 25% of the oil was recovered, leaving more than 154 million gallons of oil at sea. It was later found that the spill likely harmed or killed about 82,000 birds of 102 species, about 6,100 sea turtles, as many as 26,000 marine mammals, and a vast but unknown number of fish. As of 2024, climate change threatens over 14,000 species on the International Union for Conservation of Nature's Red List of Threatened Species, and projections suggest that if global temperatures increase by 2 degrees Celsius by 2100, about 18% of all species on land will face a high risk of going extinct. Y'all know that I'm a public health nurse and an emergency room nurse, and I live in Houston, which is one of the most polluted cities in the United States, and I see it in my practice. I watch people die from things like pulmonary hypertension, stroke, cardiac disease, people struggling with the entire last half of their lives to breathe freely because of the pollutants that we dump from the fossil fuel industry into our air, water, and soil. Texas currently generates nearly 30% of its power from wind energy, which makes us a national leader. HB 3556 would jeopardize that leadership and debilitate one of our most powerful tools in combating climate change. This bill creates barriers for clean energy development in certain coastal counties, despite these regions having some of the country's strongest wind resources. This is all part of a troubling trend that I've seen this session, with bills aimed at slowing down wind and solar growth. Instead of supporting a clean industry that also brings jobs, long-term environmental benefits, and billions in economic growth, these measures make building the infrastructure that we so desperately need much more difficult. To protect wildlife, to preserve our natural environment, we must accelerate a just transition to renewable energy, not obstruct it. Clean energy reduces pollution, protects water resources, and helps preserve the landscapes that we all value. I urge you to vote no on this bill.